Well, good morning. Welcome to the last Sunday in October. Tomorrow night is Ghost and Goblin Trick-or-Treat Night. But that's not the subject of our conversation today. We're going to be talking with an architect whose work has had a big impact on the area. We'll meet him right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
You know, we often talk about someone leaving their imprint on an area, and our guest this morning has certainly done that. Barry Polson has been an architect in Marquette for over 30 years and has been involved with some interesting and meaningful projects during that time. Barry Polson is our guest this morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us. You know, let's give people first a chance to get to know you a little better. You grew up in Marquette?
I did.
As a kid, was there anything that would have led people to believe that someday you might be an architect?
Well, you know, when I was a small child, I was 4 years old in the sandbox. I was playing around and I made a little city with some shapes. And I stood back and looked at it and thought, this is what I will do.
Really?
You know, I've been on the track to be an architect since childhood.
Pretty much your whole life?
Yeah, and never thought of anything else.
Okay. And how did you fulfill that? Where did you go to school? What training did you have?
Well, I started off in high school, in fact, in the basement of the orphanage doing a drafting class.
Really?
As a matter of fact. And took courses along those lines all through high school. Then I went to the University of Michigan and got a degree in architecture.
Okay, and when did that happen?
I graduated with a master's in 1978.
Okay. Did you get right into architect work then?
I did. I came back to Marquette upon graduating and started working with an architect and haven't stopped.
And you eventually, I think fairly soon, went off on your own?
Yeah, it was in the early 80s. If you recall, Marquette was, like much of Michigan, was really on the downside.
Right.
And all the other architects in Marquette left town.
Oh, really?
And so it left me standing, and I had just become licensed and just started working. And then shortly after that, the Main Street program started downtown Marquette, and we started one by one going down storefront after storefront, you know, redeveloping downtown Marquette. You
know, I hadn't thought about that, but those early 80s were difficult days in the mining industry. I know that, and that certainly affected the whole area.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a challenging time for a young architect to get started.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's a fun profession. You know, every project is interesting, so. At that time, lots of energy, just pushing forward and doing as many projects as I could.
Was this Main Street project the thing that really got you off the ground?
That's where it started. Actually, my first project as a solo architect, my own practice, was up at Bay Cliff Health Camp.
Oh, really?
And I've been doing projects there my entire career.
Okay.
But, yeah.
You know, we think of architects, you know, as people who design buildings. But there's really more to it than that, isn't it? It's not just coming up with a pretty picture of a building. What does it take to be an architect? What goes into it?
You really need to be very understanding, and you have to be able to think comprehensively. If you think about an architecture, it encompasses, you know, all aspects of life. And so in any given project, you've got a client that has needs and desires. You have the function of the building that has to be addressed. You have the realities of the environment you're trying to keep out or create an environment within. So you really have to think on many, many levels.
And how do you make that work? How does that happen?
You become a student of life, a student of everything. I mean, you really have to pay attention to all the things going on, whether it's the exterior climate and realities of, you know, the climate here, and the like what affects people. And you know, I used to teach this for a short time, but I would take students into Walmart versus Target, and not to plug either, but they're two different environments, and they're both created, and they were both based on decisions that somebody made. That I'll make this store like this, and I'll make that store like that. But you can walk into either one and have a different feel. And so it's those decisions that were made that create that environment.
Okay. You know, looking at some of the projects that I've seen you involved with, it appears that at times you're actually involved in the whole development as well. Is that correct?
It's certainly, I've come to learn all the aspects of putting a project together. I'm currently involved as a developer in Founders Landing, but through the years I've worked for developers primarily. A lot of our work has been for private developers, hotels, restaurants, condominiums, that type of thing. So I've certainly come to understand the legal side, the financial side, all the aspects.
Typically, what role does the architect play once construction starts? Are you still involved as a consultant, or do you have an oversight role, or how does that work typically?
Yeah, we stay very involved right through to completion. It's a big part of our work is actually during the construction phase, because once we put a set of drawings together, there's still a lot of issues, a lot of questions, things that come up during construction. And as part of our services, we actually monitor the progress, approve pay requests, that type of thing.
Okay. And when you say drawings, do you provide everything a builder needs, or do others get involved? Are there other engineers or other professions that are part of that process?
Yes, there's lots of people that are involved in putting together a set of documents to construct from. We hire engineers for various aspects of the work, but as the architect, you orchestrate it all. And so when we produce a set of drawings, it's enough for the contractors to actually go out and construct it. The guy in the field just needs to be able to look at a piece of paper and know, I've got to put a wall here, that sort of thing. So we spell it out right down to the doorknobs.
Yeah, when you see these big buildings going up especially, you wonder how someone figured all this out, but it's all there on paper for someone to follow.
It is. And I've always said that design is really making decisions. And in a course of a building, you're making thousands and thousands of decisions. Every little thing is somebody decides. There will be a light switch. It'll be this kind of light switch.
Right.
The walls will be this material. The ceiling will be that high. There are thousands of decisions that go into it.
Lots and lots of decisions. I want to talk about a project that you're involved with right now when we return. I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Our guest this morning is Marquette architect Barry Polson. I want to talk about really a very special project, and that's the Orphanage in Marquette. Now, everybody in Marquette knows about the Orphanage. Perhaps not everybody out around the UP knows it. I think we have a picture we might be able to call up that it gives people, there's a picture of the building as it is now under construction, and or under renovation, I should say. But anyway, I never dreamed that this building could be saved. And I understand this has been kind of a dream for you.
Yeah, it's a project I've actually been looking at my entire career. The building stopped being used about the same time I sort of launched my practice, and through the years I've tried many times to put a project together for that site, for the building. I've watched it go from a perfectly functional, warm, building with lights on to the state it was in when we started construction this summer. And
you said you actually took some high school classes there?
That's right. I went to Bishop Erica High School my freshman year, and we walked over to the Orphanage for our shop classes.
Okay. Just so people know, this building is just over 100 years old, right?
That's right.
And it's actually been idle for like 50 years.
I think in the early 80s. It stopped being an orphanage in the mid-60s, and then for 20 years it was offices. In Northern had some programs in there.
So it's at least 30 years it's been sitting idle.
That's right.
What is the big? First of all, there's some unusual financing involved here, isn't there, that helps to make this possible?
Yeah, this project is only possible because the developer is able to use historic tax credits and then low-income housing tax credits. Okay. And these tax credits allow the developer to get financing, basically.
Okay.
So.
And this price tag on this project, ballpark now, is?
It's $15 million. Okay. So there's no way, even with market rate rents, that you could justify spending that kind of money. So through these programs, it allows for historic buildings like this to be renovated.
And tell us what the project is going to wind up being.
We're creating 56 affordable apartments in this building. And then we're also taking the original chapel that was in the building, doing a restoration of that, and that'll be available as a community space.
Okay. Now, I understand that there was just a huge job to begin with, just clearing out debris from the building.
That's right. The building was in terrible condition. The water had been running through it for many, many years, but it was built as a poured concrete structure, and it was built as a fireproof building. So it really did survive all the abuse it's taken. But it was filled with asbestos, lead, and it was quite a pigeon rookery.
Right.
So the first 2 months, nobody was allowed to go in there without white suits on.
Okay.
And they've just literally cleaned all of that material out, and then we just stripped it down to the bare bones, and we're totally reconstructing the inside of it.
It looks like you're doing some work now on the exterior.
Yes, the exterior will be completely restored. Fortunately, all the original material was there, except for one little area where someone had made off with some sandstone. But all the original brick and all that stuff was there. It's in tough shape, but so all the mortar joints need to be scraped out and then repointed. And that's the work that you're seeing right now.
When do you expect to have this project done?
It should be wrapped up by August or September of next year.
What's the biggest challenge with a project like this?
The biggest challenge is getting through all the steps it takes to make a project like this work. And remarkably, this project kind of has a life of its own. I've done many of these historic properties into affordable housing, and they usually take 3 to 4 years. One took 7 years. This one was all the approvals, everything necessary came together in less than a year.
And we should mention who else is involved in this project, because that's unique.
Yeah, the developer is HRS out of Farmington Hills, Michigan, and the general contractor is Wolverine. And both of these entities are experienced with this kind of project.
And then on the local level, AMCAB is involved?
That's right. AMCAB is a local partner, yes.
Okay. So when this project is done, we'll have some housing, but I just think many people are amazed that this can be done. I think a lot of people felt for sure this one would not make it past the wrecking ball, but
yeah, you know, and it's fun to see it happening, and I'm looking forward to the day when I can drive down the bypass and see the lights on in the building.
that'd be great. Right now there's no windows.
That's right.
Well, there's window spaces. We'll be back with some more conversation after we take one more break. Our guest this morning is Barry Polson, talking about projects in Marquette primarily. One of the other major projects you've been involved with, and still are, is Founders Landing, which was really converting, well, tell us about the area.
Well, as most people will recall, you know, Marquette used to be sort of an ugly town, and the harbor especially.
Right.
And so the Founders Landing was a rail yard and a tank farm. And you know, the city purchased it, and the state helped clean it up and develop it into what you see today. I'm part of 2 different groups that purchased 2 of the parcels down there, and it's been really fun and satisfying to kind of work our way along the site to redevelop it.
And to this point, you've developed a number of condos.
That's right. We have constructed 33 condominium units, and 32 of them are sold.
And you were also involved with the development of the Hampton Inn.
That's right. We did all the architectural work for the Hampton Inn. And kind of worked up the master plan for the whole site.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there's kind of a big piece that hasn't developed, and I understand you're kind of looking at moving forward with that, tell us about it. It's adjacent to the Hampton Inn property.
Yeah, directly north of the Hampton, there's a hole in the ground that we
Right.
dug out a few years ago, and we're finally getting started on that. The first part of the project will be to build a parking structure down in that hole. There are 2 levels of parking that'll be below the street level. And so actually, right now, this week, we've started the digging for that.
Okay. And what's the timetable look like?
We're going to work as far as we can into the winter, take a break, and then pick it up again in the spring. And then by next June, we're actually going to see the first building that will come up on top of the parking structure.
And this is kind of a mixed use, retail, commercial?
Yes, there are 4 sites, 4 buildings that will be built on top of the parking structure. The first one will be a mixed use. It'll have 65 high-end apartments with great views and great location. And then there'll be a cafe and some office space in this first building. And then we'll have a little more commercial activity going into the future buildings.
And then you have one more condo project to complete the whole project?
That's right. There's one more condominium unit across the street, and we have 4 of those 9 units sold.
It is interesting when you mentioned Marquette's harbor, and it was true of many communities. They didn't value the scenic aspect of harbors. You know, they were just industrial places, and that certainly changed in Marquette.
Yeah, yeah, it was a real working place. And you know, if you look now with Matson Park and then what's become known as the birdhouses, you know,
Right.
all of that. And the beauty of it all is that there's a whole lot of people living downtown now, living
Right.
on the harbor, and through these projects as they go, it just keeps people in downtown, and it supports the restaurants and shops, and really builds a community.
We don't have time to cover all you've done because you've been involved in so many projects. I know you've also been on Mackinac Island. That's got to be a unique situation.
Yeah, it's a really fun place to work. Contractors won't say so, but as an architect, it's a lot of fun. I've had a project going over there almost every year for the last
Really?
30 years. Yeah. Years ago, we did a restoration of St. Anne's Church, did some
Okay.
work up at the fort. I've done a number of small hotels downtown.
Okay. And I've noticed people building some palatial homes there now. It has to be difficult for contractors.
It really is difficult. Literally, you have to have the horse and dray deliver your material.
Right.
In some ways, you have to think back the way they built back then without the equipment that you have today to build with. So
You are also involved, I think, with the Mackinac Crossings project.
that was a project we did years ago. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was a fun project, creating kind of outdoor public spaces. That was really a fun project.
You know, I've said there were three major historic buildings in Marquette that almost made it to the wrecking ball. One was the Landmark Inn, the Hotel Northland, which became the Landmark Inn. And you were not directly involved in the project at that point.
Right.
But the Rosewood Inn is one you were involved with in a big way.
Yep.
And of course the Orphanage we just talked about.
Yeah.
And it's good to see perhaps some activity happening again with the Rosewood or the Upfront and Company.
Yeah, yeah, that was another fun project where it literally was about to be torn down, and Reese Mussman stepped forward and had spent his college days here in Marquette and bought the building, and that took a while to put together, but it was a great building to save.
Does all of the construction that's going on now in Marquette affect the viability of some projects with the demand on construction labor?
You're certainly seeing a shortage of labor in some categories, but all in all, it just seems to be stimulating interest in Marquette. You know, just a lot of people from all over the country are coming here.
Okay. We have only a minute left. What gives you the greatest satisfaction in doing the job of an architect?
The greatest satisfaction is completing a building and just sitting back and looking at people enjoying it.
It's got to give you some satisfaction to be able to walk around Marquette and see so many examples of that.
It does feel good. It does feel good. And if you stay in one place long enough, your work adds up. So
And any other big projects in the pipeline?
we have quite a few big projects in the pipeline.
Still got some ideas?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thanks very much for coming in and talking with us this morning. I appreciate it a lot.
My
Okay.
pleasure.
We'll be back with some other thoughts on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Well, before we go this morning, I have some good news to report. For a number of reasons, the election date has been pushed back a month, so we have an additional 4 weeks to listen to the campaign rhetoric. Just kidding. I better say that quickly before someone takes me seriously. All I can say is that if you are at all like me, election day can't come soon enough. And that's not necessarily because I'm anxious to vote. There's been a lot of conversation about this year's presidential campaign. Many people feel it's in a class by itself. I hesitate to use the word class because it certainly doesn't describe this election. Some are concerned it's the strangest and probably the nastiest ever. That may be true, but a little research on the internet tells us there have been some pretty nasty campaigns in the past. Among those mentioned are Lincoln versus Douglas in 1860, Andrew Jackson squaring off against John Quincy Adams in 1828, Grover Cleveland against James Blaine in 1884, and Herbert Hoover versus Al Smith in 1928. But some believe the nastiest from that era may have been the campaign between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams in 1800. A little background. Thomas Jefferson was John Adams' vice president, but the two had major differences, and Jefferson left Washington, went home to his estate to plan his own campaign to oppose Adams in the next election. This was the only election in history where a vice president was running against the president he was currently serving under. Jefferson hired a writer to pen insults, including writing that Adams was a hideous, hermaphrodite character which has neither the force and firmness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman. Adams and his supporters carried things even further, asking voters, "Are you prepared to see your dwellings in flames, female chastity violated, children writhing on the pike? Great God of compassion and justice, shield my country from destruction." All of those are quotes from Adams' followers. As the slurs piled on, Adams was labeled a fool, a hypocrite, a criminal, and a tyrant, while Jefferson was branded a weakling, an atheist, a libertine, and a coward. I guess we heard it all before. When the campaign came to an end, Jefferson was the winner. A dozen years later, the two men actually renewed their friendship. Then on July 4th, 1826, at the age of 90, Adams lay on his deathbed while the country celebrated Independence Day. His last words were, "Thomas Jefferson still survives," but he was mistaken. Jefferson had died 5 hours earlier at the age of 82. Two American legends died on the 4th of July. I'm not sure what my sharing this information accomplishes today, other than to remind us that nasty presidential campaigns didn't start in 2016. They didn't start this year, but the current campaign will likely win the prize for the nastiest of all. Not a prize worth pursuing. I'll be back in 2 minutes. The Today Show is about ready to roll, and it's coming up next. Remember, you can also watch us on the internet at uppermichigansource.com. Today's show will be available starting tomorrow afternoon. Thanks to Barry Polson for joining us this morning to talk about some of the interesting projects he's been involved with. And thank you for joining us. I hope that tomorrow you have no tricks and lots of treats, and that we can look forward to seeing you again next Sunday morning.